Welcome back to another episode of Justice for Y'all. I'm Paul Painter, and with me, as always, Andrew Bowen and Stephen Morrison. Gents, how are you?
Hanging in there.
Doing it as well as I can do.
You know what I'm very disappointed about?
The Georgia Bulldogs?
Well,
That's exactly what I was thinking, but
obvious, but
it seems a little soon.
well, it's 11 o'clock, and neither one of y'all have wished me a happy birthday yet.
Well, we don't know what day this is going to air, so.
But it's my birthday right now.
It's your birthday?
It's my birthday. Thanks, guys.
Go,
I've
Shorty.
gotten like
Happy
15
birthday.
texts, but none from my law partners.
What day
Right.
is it? It's January 9th?
Yeah.
Shoot.
Me and Nixon, we had the
Let's
same
cut
birthday.
that out.
And my brother.
Oh, I forgot. Fraser's birthday?
Yep.
Well, yeah. That,
So now you
everything's even.
That's even worse, man. I mean,
Oh, I knew about it. I just.
It's actually a sign of affection. So,
well, I don't feel a day over 47.
well, that's good. You're not quite.
But tomorrow you will.
I'm gonna have to.
That's right.
Is this on the firm? We have some administrative questions we have to resolve behind the scenes.
It's on the firm calendar.
Well,
Yeah.
I must have got kicked out the firm.
I tell you what, I just don't feel loved. That's all it is.
I give you a big air hug
Yeah,
on
I'm good.
air.
I'm good. Thank you.
An on air hug. Well, that was a good episode. So,
All right.
Yeah. So this is this episode is about how your business associates can disappoint you and break your heart.
yeah, don't count on anyone.
So today we're going to talk about a question that we get asked a lot. Do I have a case?
You're tuned into the podcast where justice meets Southern hospitality. Broadcasting directly from Savannah, Georgia, join your hosts, Paul, Stephen, and Andrew of Bowen Painter Trial Lawyers as they chat about the legal difficulties you might face in everyday life. From the ports of Savannah to the busy highways that stretch through the Southeast, we're your go-to source for all things legal. Served up with a dose of Southern charm and commitment to justice for y'all.
Case. And we've spoken before about do I need a lawyer? And that's kind of doesn't meet a threshold of where you need a lawyer or where you don't need a lawyer. This is a little bit different. And we're going to talk about do I have a case as in what are our criteria when we look at cases and what are some of the things we do to determine whether or not it's a case we're going to take and be able to prosecute or whether it's not something we want to take. And if it's not something we want to take, do you may still have a case, and what can we do to help you with that with somebody else?
Okay.
Sound good?
Sounds good.
So I think there's a big range of cases that we see come in within our wheelhouse, right? You've got your basic car wreck case. If somebody gets in a car wreck, the other person at fault, and they got hurt, that generally meets our criteria. And while most of our cases are pretty serious injuries, we can help somebody who's gotten in a car wreck and it was the other person's fault and they're hurt. And that doesn't take a lot of, we don't have to think about that too much. That's pretty much the criteria. Somebody else, you got hurt, it was somebody else's fault, fine, it's car wreck.
We can help you with that.
Yeah. The most complicated I think we see on a regular basis at least is medical malpractice, because we do handle medical malpractice cases, but we're very selective with them, and there's a reason for that. They're difficult cases. I think they're the most difficult personal injury case that is a common personal injury case at least. And they're very expensive, and they're almost always going to be litigated to close to trial, if not to trial. And you can have a good medical malpractice case that where the doctor most likely did commit malpractice, but still lose the case at trial because jurors traditionally want to give the doctor a benefit of the doubt if it's a judgment call. So if it's a close call, it's not going to go your way in a medical malpractice case. So we want to get involved and really take a deep look to make sure that the doctor, there was negligence and that negligence caused some serious injury. And sometimes that takes a while because it requires us to look in the medical records, consult with experts, that sort of thing.
And really, it needs to be pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Even though the defense is going to fight it and fight it and fight it, it needs to be, at least to us, is like, oh my gosh, that's how could he have made that decision?
The oh my gosh factor is actually pretty important.
Yeah.
If we don't get the oh my, if we don't hear the case and from a human point of view go, oh my goodness,
Right.
we're not going to even look any further.
And just as an example, had a case recently that came in for a lady. She ended up passing away, and I'm convinced there was malpractice in the case. But the course of this treatment spanned about 6 weeks. There were 5 or 6 different doctors that had a shot at it and facilities. and it's just too complicated. That was our ultimate decision. It would have been too complicated to show clearly who did what that was negligent and ended up in her death. And I'm convinced that she was not treated properly, and unfortunately, we had to turn that case down, not because we didn't believe that something was wrong, but we didn't believe we could win it.
And you just went through that, winning the case, but you went through a case that you tried last spring and got a $6 million verdict. But there were 3 doctors involved, and it's just
gotta be
so
the right case.
difficult. Well, I mean, that was a really, really hard case, I thought, just because you've got 3 doctors, and by its nature, you think, well, 3 doctors touched the case, are they all going to be liable? Of course, one of them was found not liable.
Correct.
But then you also have 3 sets of defense firms, and you have a lot to deal with. And those cases become really hard, even like you say, if you're convinced that something went wrong. The longer it spans out, the more people are involved, the more difficult the case becomes. That's not to say that we wouldn't take a case like that, but it's sort of a unicorn at that point.
It's part of the reason it takes us longer to do an eval of the merits of a case. We may sign it up because we see you come in, you had a procedure or were treated and with some kind of professional, and we get that, oh my gosh, something is wrong here. You have to have somebody with the qualifications, particularly in Georgia. It is a requirement that if you're going to pursue a claim of professional malpractice, which medical malpractice is a type of professional malpractice, you have to have a professional in that field actually provide a sworn affidavit pointing out at least one instance of malpractice or failure to meet what we call the standard of care. Basically, the level of conduct that a professional in that same circumstance would have done or would not have done, depending on what happened. You have to provide that to the court before you can even start your lawsuit. So we have to figure that out. We'll figure out, okay, this sounds like it's got a case, has the oh my gosh factor, but then we have to go through this next sort of longer period of getting records, finding the right person with the right expertise so they'd be qualified to provide this affidavit and potentially ultimately testify at a trial. And that is just a long process. And if there are multiple points of failure or breaches of the standard of care, it's just that much more complicated, that much more expensive, because you have to have a competent person testify as to each of those points of deviation from the standard.
You may need a hospitalist expert. You may need a anesthesiologist expert. All the different things, and all of them are expensive.
Yep.
I mean, doctors we have to hire them, and it's going to be expensive. That's why we sometimes will sign up a case where it smells like we've done this long enough to be like, this doesn't sound right. But then we get into it, and if we get the experts, and it's our policy to get. You can find an expert to say just about anything in this world, but we get experts who are well credentialed, they're objective, and
will tell us there's not a case.
Right. And we've had that happen, and we'd rather find out then. And frankly, I think a lot of times, the family would rather know then. If we have an expert who says it really wasn't, maybe it wasn't exactly the best, but it wasn't negligence, it wasn't a violation of standard of care. That's going to save everybody years of slugging through a very contested lawsuit and, the expense of it all.
So a lot of times the question, do I have a case, requires us to really investigate to figure out whether you do or not.
And investigate.
Right. That's right. We'll send it to a nurse first to say, let's see if it passes muster. Like, can you tell us whether there's something there or not? And then if it passes the nurse, then we'll go find the doctors to do it.
But that's true not just in medical cases.
Sure.
As an example,
that's a great point.
You guys had one come in the past week that was a hit and run, and our client was on a moped. And as it turns out, correct me if I'm wrong, he does not have any insurance himself because he doesn't own a car.
Right.
Therefore, there's no what's called uninsured motorist coverage. So the only way to pursue a case on his behalf was to identify the perpetrator, the person who hit him and left the scene of the wreck. Without finding that person, there was negligence. He was hurt, but we don't have anybody to go after to get any sort of justice for him whatsoever.
Right.
So tell me what y'all did in that case.
So Steve and I mean, this came in, I think it was late Friday night. And so it was Saturday. I was driving back from visiting some relatives, and Steve was home. We immediately started talking once we read it, and I got in touch with the client who was in the hospital still. He'd been there for a week, but need to ask him, well, where did this happen? And he said, it was on Waters. I'm not sure what the cross street is. And so he got on Google Maps and figured out which cross street it was. And so about that time, so we're talking, Stephen goes and pulls the accident report, which we can do, and gets a look at that, sees who the witnesses are, and confirms where it happened. And then, the client told us a little bit about it. It said it was a certain type of vehicle, which is let's get the details, but is an
identifiable.
Yeah. And so some of the witnesses we found out said, well, I think he lives nearby there. So I went, when I came back in town, and rode up and down the street where, near where he got hit to look for the vehicle. Didn't find it. So then we went to the businesses nearby who, everybody's got Ring doorbell cameras or, security cameras, and tried to see if anybody got a good picture of it. And so it was Saturday, not all the businesses there were open, but the ones that were there I talked to. Didn't get anything that day. Well, then we went by there again, and we talked to the businesses on Monday. Steve and I drove over there, and they were trying to pull their clips. Stephen called the witness and talked to the witness for a while, and the witness told you where he thought he lived, right?
Yeah, so the witness had talked to a couple of other witnesses that were there and showed up. And the important part of this is you get certain information from the police report from the client. The police report led me to the witness, and what they said, or what the officer wrote down about the witness, was not everything that was interesting about what happened. I mean, you got to do a little more diligence, which is kind of the fun part. So I talked to the witness, I get more information that not only could he describe the vehicle, but he had talked to some other folks and said, oh yeah, I know that vehicle. It's on this street right around the corner. It's there all the time. And so it was a little further over from where Paul and I had ridden around a couple of days before. So I happened to be in the area when I was learning all this, and I just drove down and up and down the street until I found a vehicle that it seems to match the description. And that's potentially off to the races at that point.
You and I have not talked about it specifically. Were you able to identify any damage to the vehicle that looked like it might have been related to this wreck?
Yeah. So I was, and everything matched up to what I would expect you hitting a mopedist on there. There are a couple of things that don't jive up, so you got to figure out, is that just witness recollection, or was there some repair that was done, or did somebody miss something on that? So we're putting those pieces together, but not only did it match the description, it was in the area and had damage in the areas you would expect if it was involved in a collision.
So that's when you kicked down the door and grabbed him by the collar and dragged him out, served him a lawsuit right then and there?
I performed a citizen's arrest, gave him the old roughing up, and he's, out on the back of a shrimp boat right now until he talks.
So, seriously though, the next step was to call the police and inform them of what we found.
Right.
And hopefully the police are by now finding him and, probably arresting him for a hit and run.
Well, that's too bad. I had another hit and run case that resolved recently, and we relied heavily on what the police investigation was. When it comes to the question of, do I have a case, the sooner you talk to a lawyer, the better, for a lot of reasons. And one of them is the one we just talked about, because if this hadn't happened 2 weeks ago, all of this evidence gets stale, memories start to fade. I was able to call the witness and talk to him just a couple weeks after it happened, and he remembered it immediately. The folks that were at the clinic were aware of the intersection being one. That's when the guy that I talked to was like, oh yeah, that's a dangerous intersection. So you got to get it, the sooner the better, for a lot of different reasons. The other one is on the injury side of it, of do I have a case, is sometimes you come in, oh, I got into a car accident and my neck's a little sore, but I think I'm okay. And then you keep doing a little PT, or you go line, it's still sore, your elbow starts to tingle, your fingers are numb, and things. You're like, well, this wasn't there before, and it turns into something more serious. But if you get involved with a lawyer at the time, we can actually help you identify those injuries and look out to where it could go. And then even, we have, we don't ever tell you need to go to this doctor, but we can provide you access to folks that we know that work with people who are involved in personal injury cases. If you don't have insurance, or if you work, a lot of government-funded insurance is not always as available or as open to the care you might need now, we can help you find some of those resources.
A lot of times the question is not just, do I have a case? Sometimes it's obvious you have a case, but the real question is, what case do I actually have?
Right.
Let me tell you what I mean. We had a case several years ago, Paul, you'll remember this, where a couple was visiting town, and they were walking across it was, I think, 2 lanes of travel in each direction with a divided median and then turn lanes. So it was a very large intersection, and a car that was turning left through that intersection ran over them in the crosswalk.
Right. And there was a conflict between the crosswalk
Yeah.
green sign and the car's turning.
But the obvious case they had was the car that ran over them,
Right.
which didn't have enough insurance to deal with the catastrophic injuries that the wife in particular suffered. But the fact that we went out to that intersection and just kind of looked around and realized a couple of things. One, we realized that there were light poles that were supposed to illuminate the intersection that didn't have lights on them. So in our mind, we're like, well, who's responsible for that? And it ends up being a combination of a governmental energy entity and the power company.
And I don't mind saying this is 8 years ago, and Chatham County still has not put proper lights on
Right.
there.
And then the other thing we realized is that you have the layout of this intersection, and you have this crosswalk where people are expected to be walking, often at night, and you have a left turn arrow with less than a ideal line of sight for cars turning left, and you also have a walk sign at the same time. So you have these people walking across with their backs to this car that's turning left, and you have the car turning left at the same time that's with a green arrow, and the traffic signals created a dangerous situation.
And without the lights being there to illuminate the crosswalk,
Yeah.
the angle of the headlights, the driver doesn't see the people walking across until it's too late.
Right. So, all that is to say, that's another example of how oftentimes we have to investigate, do the actual legwork to realize and answer the question whether you got a case or not.
And I think that's a good example, too, of that case, the defendants in the case, there were a number of defendants, the engineer who designed the crosswalk, the Department of Transportation who owned the crosswalk, Chatham County who was responsible for the lighting, and Georgia Power who actually put up the lighting. Well, anybody listening to the show knows that those entities, being government entities, a lot of them have a lot of immunity, and I don't think it can be shocking to anybody. Georgia Power doesn't enjoy immunity, but when
that actually may not be that may be a shock that
they
don't enjoy an immunity.
Yeah, well, when you're the most powerful energy broker in a state for a century, the laws have tended to go your way a lot, and it's very, very hard to recover against Georgia Power for many things, but certainly for a lighting situation. It's a very narrow thing. So the point of that is, as we looked into this, do you have a case? Yes, you've got a case against the person who hit you, not a problem. Do you have a case for the rest of it? We got to look into the facts and get the experts to say what should have been done here. And then we got to look at the law to see how do we get past these immunity issues and difficult legal issues to the facts support it. So sometimes we got to look at, gather the facts, then we get the facts and still say, well, what's our legal claim and what are the defenses? Because maybe, if it's absolute immunity and there's not a way around it, then again, we can just say you can't do it.
Yeah, the recovery piece of it is important. One, for the client getting compensated, because at the end of the day, they're going to get their money. There will be fees and expenses that comes out of that. And depending on how much it takes based on our view of it, that you may not have a case. You might have a claim. Somebody did something wrong. It goes back to the same points we talked about with malpractice. But one of the things that we do, I think we enjoy doing, is figuring out those. Sometimes they're not even that creative, but they do require some legal expertise to see a car wreck case turns into a nuisance case or a products case.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And you see that happen if you get involved in like tractor trailer cases like we get to do. A lot of those cases have turned into products cases against the manufacturer of the vehicle that the person that was injured was driving, or maybe even the tractor trailer components if there was a failure in the manufacturing process or the design of a certain feature. All those things are good for that case as we can build up where you can recover from, who's going to be responsible. They also help advance
who's at
safety.
fault.
Yeah, and they advance safety too. And one that comes, on tractor trailers, when you pull up behind, you're driving behind a tractor trailer at a safe distance, like you should be. If you see that bar that comes down behind that bar is there as I understand it, largely due to lawsuits.
Yeah, it's called an underride bar.
An underride bar keeps you from going under. The tractor trailer doesn't work perfectly. We have a case where still have an underride issue that resulted in a fatality, but it does reduce the numbers. And if it wasn't for the industry that we practice in, that type of advancement in safety may not have been as high priority for the companies designing
Same
those
thing
trailers.
can be said about seatbelts and airbags. So,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, exactly right.
But we're getting off topic a little bit.
Yeah.
So one thing what we look at with cases that come in is sometimes let's talk about getting hurt at work, okay? We don't in-house handle workers' compensation. We work with people who do, and so, people call us and say, I got hurt in work, can you help me? But it's that third party you just talked about. So maybe somebody's working on a wood chipper or something like that. Or let's give a real example. An electrician who got hurt at work was working at a large industrial facility here, and we represented this person a decade ago now, and got electrical shock when working in this facility that nearly killed him. And he couldn't sue his employer who was there because that's barred by workers' comp. You can't sue your employer. You can only recover in workers' comp. So he had that case. But there was a case against the owner of the facility because he was in with a team. They were a contract coming in there. They didn't work for the facility for their premises liability case there. And so that's the type of thing of most people think, well, I got hurt at work. I got a workers' compensation case if they know anything about it. What we look at is if it's an industrial accident, there is oftentimes multiple groups that are involved with that, and there may be a recovery in tort, which is a bigger recovery if you get hurt in something like that than just the workers' comp recovery.
Right. And in that case, the issue was that the facility had their electrical circuit diagram was inaccurate, and the breaker box where hopefully everything was turned off and locked out.
Tag out.
There was a stray circuit coming through that wasn't part of that breaker box and allowed for a live wire to electrocute our guy. I'm disappointed in both of you that
We already told Paul happy birthday.
Paul, talked about the fact that he was shocked by the power of Georgia Power, and nobody picked up on the pun then.
I picked up on it, but I just let it ride. But what good did that do?
You got your
Yeah. I'm not proficient enough with our sound
He's
effect buttons.
been abroad too often. He doesn't remember the buttons anymore.
That's true. Your mind's still on the ski slopes.
But in that vein, I caught my son chewing on an electrical cord the other day. I had to ground him. He's doing better currently, and conducting himself properly.
I can't recover.
Can we end on that?
That's
is
the
that
end.
it? Is that anyway? So I guess So I guess to our point in this episode is a lot of the stuff we get involved with sometimes is very clear, and something went wrong. We know when something went wrong. The whole world does. What I think we differentiate is if you've got complicated issues, it's like somebody did wrong, but how do you go from somebody did wrong to you can get justice and recover? And I think a lot of lawyers will stop at the obvious cases. They take those cases. If it gets more complicated, that's the stuff that we can get into. Now, we're happy to handle as many, the other thing we're good at is, I think, getting good recovery and big damages, on clear liability, high value cases. I mean, those are especially, we increase the value of those cases with doing the same things, same tools we put into place of figuring out how to get value out of complicated cases. So
getting value out of cases where you may not see a lot, or maximizing the value where there's already value.
Right.
Yeah. All right, guys.
All right.
Well, that was electric.
Thanks for listening to Justice for Y'all, hosted by the attorneys here at Bowen Painter Trial Lawyers in Savannah, Georgia. If today's episode resonated with you, or if you find yourself needing legal guidance, remember, we're just a call away. You don't have to work through the difficulties of your situation alone. Visit our website at bowenpainter.com, that's BOWENPAINTER.com, or give us a call at 912-335-1909. We're here to serve you with the dedication and warmth only true Southern hospitality can offer. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform so you don't miss an episode. And tell your friends and family about us if they're ever in need of some legal insight. Take care, and remember that at Bowen Painter Trial Lawyers, we're committed to justice for y'all.